Hey guys, welcome back to another great game of CEDH. Starting today off is Gabe on Urza, Lord Artificer. This is a mono blue artifact control list, aiming to control the board with stax pieces, such as Winter Orb or Static Orb, while breaking parity with your commander, ultimately aiming for infinite mana through various means to win the game. Next up is Hidden on Kumena, Tyrant of Orazca. This is a Simic good stuff list, aiming to use Merfolk synergies to give him a fleet of powerful creatures and interaction, with the ultimate goal of comboing with Isochron Dramatic Scepter for infinite mana and untaps to win with your commander. In the third spot is Fernando on Brago, King Eternal. This Azorius artifact control list uses Brago's ability to both reset mana rocks and give card advantage by abusing ETB effects. It's a slow and grindy deck that aims for the late game, utilizing an infinite combo with Strionic Resonator as a win con. And bringing up the rear is Jordan on Omnath, Locus of All. This is a 5-color ramp deck, letting you funnel your unused mana into an early peer into the abyss. And if worse comes to worse, it simply acts as an extra card advantage engine to keep you in the game.
Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board.
Also, if you want to support the channel, check out Into the AM for some cool shirts and use code DOBMTG10 or the link down below for 10% off your order. But without further ado, let's get onto the gameplay. Gabe starts off the game with an Urza Saga. He plays out an Ornithopter and taps his Saga to cast a Pithing Needle. He's fearful of Brago and names Strionic Resonator. Hidden as a Yavimaya cradles Growth's land and casts a Birds of Paradise. Fernando on his turn just plays a Misty Rainforest and has the turn over. Jordan has a quick turn just playing out a tap Xander's Lounge. Gabe untaps and gains his second lore counter. He has a snow-covered island as land and wants to send a message attacking Fernando for 0. Hidden misses his land drop and ends up tapping his bird to cast a Curse Catcher, with Fernando at his end step cracking his fetch for a tapped Hollowed Fountain. Fernando has an Urza Saga as land return, but continues to hold mana open as he passes. Jordan plays out a Mana Confluence and taps 2 for a Lotus Cobra. Gabe heads to his turn, draws, and gains his third Saga counter. He then taps his Saga before sacrificing it and searches out an artifact. But in response to the search, Fernando flashes in an Archivist of Ogma. The creature resolves, with Gabe finding a Jeweled Lotus to put on the battlefield. Fernando gains a life and draws off the Archivist, with Gabe then using his Floating Colorless and his Lotus to help cast his commander Urza, with him gaining a Construct on ETB. He then plays out a Prismatic Vista as land return and cracks it for a snow-covered island. He'll feed another card to Fernando and follows all of this up with a Tribute Mage. Gabe apparently is just making up for the earlier hate as Fernando gets to draw again, with Gabe finding a Lightning Greaves off the ETB. He then taps the Construct and the Ornithopter to help cast the equipment, suiting up the Urza as soon as possible. Hidden misses another land as he uses his Birds of Paradise for a blue to cast a Mystic Remora. The enchantment resolves with Hidden passing the turn, hoping to get at least a few draws off the fish. Fernando draws and gets another lore counter. He plays and cracks a Flooded Strand for a Tundra, following it up with a Mana Vault. He lets Hidden draw and then casts a Rhystic Study. He still can't pay for the fish and Hidden draws again. Fernando then for 2 casts a Phantasmal Image. It'll enter as a copy of Urza, with Fernando ending his turn getting his Construct. Jordan plays out a Polluted Delta and triggers his Cobra for a red mana. He cracks the Delta for an untapped Overgrown Tomb and gives Fernando a draw of his Archivist, with the land entering and giving him a black mana off the Cobra. He now can cast his commander Omnath, but spends 2 life on the Phyrexian so he can use his floating black mana to pay for the Rhystic. Gabe starts off his turn with a Tanglewire. He pays for the Rhystic, but gives Hidden a card off the fish. Gabe then follows it up with a Voltaic Key, continuing to pay for the Rhystic, but not the fish. Hidden untaps, floats some mana to pay for the fish, and then taps down his stuff. He did finally find a land as he plays and cracks a misty rainforest. He goes searching for a trop as Fernando gains one and draws another card off his archivist. Hidden then casts a Mox Diamond and discards a Gemstone Cavern, with Hidden using his trop to pay for the Rhystic. Fernando untaps, taps down a few things off the Tangle Wire, and then draws and gets his third counter on his Saga. Fernando finds a Soul Ring and then taps the ring for an Arcane Signet. Hidden draws off the fish, with Fernando then tapping 3 for a Skyclave Apparition, who on ETB exiles Gabe's Lightning Greaves. Jordan untaps, and in response to the Tangle Wire casts a Maelstrom's Charm, choosing to deal 5 to Urza. He lets both Fernando and Hidden draw, with Gabe responding by tapping his artifacts to pay for a March of Swirling Mist, to try and phase out Urza. Hidden and Fernando draw, but the March resolves. Jordan then taps down his stuff for the Tangle Wire, and has a Plaza of Heroes as land for turn. He gains a black mana off his Cobra, and casts a Demonic Tutor. Jordan is also generous with the card draw, as Hidden and Fernando draw again, with Fernando getting a second draw off his Archivist as well. Jordan then ends his turn finding the card he needs to hand. Gabe untaps, takes down his Tangle Wire, and then taps down his stuff. He still has a bunch of mana due to the Urza, and casts a Fabricate. Hidden and Fernando draw, with Gabe finding an Unwinding Clock. Fernando then draws off his Archivist, with Gabe then casting a Codex Shredder. Fernando and Hidden will draw again. Gabe is done for his turn, with Hidden at his end step, free casting a Force of Vigor. He pitches a Legolas's Quick Reflexes, and hopes to destroy the Tangle Wire and the Rhystic. Hidden can pay for the Rhystic, and surprisingly, it resolves, as Hidden then heads to his turn. Hidden untaps and is free from the Tangle Wire. He continues to pay for the fish, and then has an island as land for turn. Tapping 2, he casts a Poor Man's Seedborn, as he casts a Quest for Renewal. He also has too many cards in hand, as he pays 2 life for a Noxious Revival. He wants a little bit more safety, as he puts a Force of Vigor back on top, and then heads to discard. He pitches an Emperor Mihal and a One Ring. Fernando has a snow-covered island as land for turn, and casts a Mox Diamond. Hidden draws, and Fernando discards a Windswept Heath. He then casts a Trinket Mage, and then finds and casts a Mana Crypt. Hidden draws, with Fernando following that up with a Soul Herder. But Hidden is worried about him rebuying his Skyclave, and responds to that with a Mindbreak Trap. Fernando then heads to combat and sends his Construct at Hidden for 8, with Fernando ending his turn also discarding down due to hand size. Jordan heads to his turn and reveals a Niv Mizzet off the Omnath trigger. He adds 2 blue and a red to his mana pool, and then casts a Bonafide Seedborn Muse. The Muse sticks, with Jordan taking 2 to play an untapped Steam Vents. He continues to ramp as he casts a Tempt with Discovery. Hidden draws, with Jordan searching out a World Tree as land. And with that, the table talks it over whether or not they take the bargain, with the table ultimately falling for the temptation, with Gabe finding an Academy Ruins, Hidden grabbing out a Breeding Pool, and Fernando getting an Ancient Tomb. Jordan then also finds out a Command Tower, an untapped Hollowed Fountain, and a Reflecting Pool. And not only did Jordan gain a bunch of lands, he also gets mana off his Cobra, which lets him tap out to cast a Genesis Ultimatum. He gives a card to Hidden, but forgot about the Curse Catcher, as Hidden pops the Merfolk to counter the spell. That's it for Jordan, as Gabe at his end step activates his Shredder to mill Jordan for 1 as well. Both Gabe and Jordan untap, with Gabe on his upkeep activating his Academy Ruins to put his Tangle Wire back on top. Gabe draws it for turn, and then casts his Tutored Unwinding Clock. He gives a card to Hidden, with the clock resolving. Then at his end step, Jordan floats all of his mana, as it'll stay around due to the Omnath, and Hidden casts a March of Swirling Mist. He taps his bird to get a counter on his quest, and pitches a Drift of Phantasm to target Omnath, Urza, and the Phantasmal Image. The image will sack regardless, but in response, Jordan pays 3 of his floating mana into his Plaza of Heroes to give his Omnath Hexproof while Urza phases out. Now everyone untaps, well, everyone except Fernando, with Hidden letting his fish go. A windswept heath then comes out as land, with Hidden tapping 2 to cast a flesh duplicate. The clone resolves, with it entering as a Seedborn Muse. Hidden then casts his Commander Kumena, but this is too much for Fernando, as he tails ends it, placing the merfolk back into the watery depths. Hidden then cracks his fetch for a basic forest and floats a mana off of his birds, to give his quest another counter. He ends up using the mana to channel out a Boseiju to destroy the Unwinding Clock, with Gabe activating his Shredder to mill Fernando for 1, as he searches out a land himself, with Fernando getting to draw off of his Archivist. Fernando, Hidden, and Jordan untap, with Fernando winning his Crypt roll. A Lightning Greaves then comes out, with him then tapping 4 to cast his Commander Brago. Brago is then suited up, with Fernando then casting a Talisman of Progress into a Mystic Remora. But in response, Hidden free casts his Force of Vigor to destroy the Greaves and the Construct. But Fernando is not having it, as he fires off a Dovin's Veto. Gabe in response activates his key to untap his Shredder and mill Fernando for 1, but that's all for the Force, as it's countered and the fish resolves. Fernando then heads to combat and sends the hasty Brago at Jordan, with his 8/8 Construct heading at Hidden. There are no blocks, with Fernando getting to blink his stuff with Brago. Fernando has a few triggers as he Skyclaves Gabe's Voltaic Key, and finds a Mox Opal off the Trinket Mage. With Fernando on his second main, casting his Sensei's Divining Top. Activating the top, he looks at the top 3, and follows it up with an Esper Sentinel. Although it won't do much against Jordan, as Fernando ends his turn there, with Jordan floating a bunch more mana, and Hidden tapping his bird for another counter on his quest. Jordan heads to his turn and doesn't reveal off Omnath. He has a Misty as land for turn and gets a blue off his Cobra. He uses some of his floating black to cast an Atraxa Grand Unifier, who resolves, letting Jordan look at the top 10. He finds a Mana Crypt, Death to the Deathless, Heroic Intervention, and Averting Catacombs. He casts the Mana Crypt and gives 2 cards to Fernando. He decides to just go for it as he casts his Death to the Deathless, where X equals 21. There's a fish trigger, but responding to it, Fernando tops. He rearranges and then draws his card. He apparently didn't find a counterspell as he activates top again to look at the top 3. Then with his new round of priority, Hidden responds with a mana drain. And surprisingly, it also resolves, with Hidden now having a windfall of mana on his next turn. And with his win attempt thwarted, Jordan heads to combat. He sends Omnath at Gabe for 4, with Jordan ending his turn, cracking his fetch for Bayou. Gabe, Hidden, and Jordan all on tap, with Gabe at his upkeep using his Academy Ruins to return his Unwinding Clock to the top of his library. He'll then draw it for turn and cast it. Gabe will pay for the Esper Sentinel, but not the fish. The clock then resolves, with Hidden at his end step, flashing in a Hullbreaker Horror. Hidden untaps, Jordan untaps, and Gabe untaps his artifacts. Hidden then gains 25 colorless mana due to the mana drain, and tries and figure out the best way to spend it. He starts off with an Agatha's Soul Cauldron. He pays for the Esper, but not the fish, and then uses his Horror to bounce his Flesh Duplicate back to hand. He recasts the clone, with the Horror trying to bounce Jordan's Commander. Jordan will respond with the Heroic Intervention. Fernando unfortunately misses his triggers as the intervention resolves, with the Flesh Duplicate entering as a copy of Atraxa. Hidden looks at the top 10 and finds a Verdant, a Transmute Artifact, a Thassa's Oracle, a Soul Ring, and a Pact of Negation. Hidden then plays the Verdant as land and casts his Soul Ring. This time he wants to bounce the fish, with the Hullbreaker, and uses his Floating Colorless to pay for the fish. But the enchantment is bounced, with Hidden then casting an Elvish Spirit Guide to trigger his Horror to bounce his Soul Ring. Hidden then recasts the ring to bounce his Soul Cauldron. Next up is a Transmute Artifact on his Mox Diamond to grab him a Mana Crypt. And with that, he can actually loop his artifacts for Infinite Colorless, and then replay his Flesh Duplicate on Urza to let him infinitely activate to cast everything and ultimately win with the Thassa's Oracle. And you get an untap, and you get an untap, Everyone gets an untap. Well, honestly, I did not expect that game to end the way it did. I really thought Fernando was just going to overwhelm us when we fed him so many cards. He was not only able to copy an Urza, but keep his commander. Although what ended up doing him in was, I think, the freedom from the fish. He really just ended up dumping his hand over keeping interaction. And with Jordan floating so much black mana, that was a little scary. Granted, Hidden happily took the extra mana from his drain. And, funnily enough, it was actually Gabe that ended up needing the mana that game. The Tangle Wire was nice, but ultimately just didn't stick around long enough to really have a proper impact on the board or give him the time needed for a value engine. With both his Tangle Wire and Unwinding Clock being destroyed and then rebought, he spent the whole game trying to build an engine and ended up delaying him until it was too late. Thanks to everyone that joined for the game. And before everyone leaves, I want to thank our special Patreon members, Sly Fox, Tango Down, and Holy Septic for the support of the channel, along with all of our other Patreon supporters as well. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.